Imagine a world where love between two people is a crime. No, we're not talking about things that are already taboo. We're talking about something much deeper. A night meant for spiritual elevation that in some communities became the most dangerous night for marital intimacy. I'm talking about Shabbat, a day for rest and contemplation, a day we now associate with peace and family harmony. But thousands of years ago, things were different. Intimacy on Shabbat was considered a sin for which you could be punished. What if I told you that all of this changed? Not just a simple reversal, but a complete 180-degree turn. From the greatest sin to the greatest obligation. An act so sacred that to neglect it could be fatal. Why did this radical change happen? How does a taboo become a sacred ritual? And what does this all have to do with a mysterious pillar of fire that foretells death? Stay with me until the end, because what we're about to reveal will forever change your understanding of religion, sex, and human faith. To understand this revolution, we need to go back in time. In some early Jewish communities, Shabbat was a day of extreme strictness. Anything that could be considered work or even pleasure was forbidden. Tradition held that Shabbat was a day for complete spiritual purification. Any thought or action not related to the worship of God was condemned. And here's the shocking part: even intimacy between a husband and wife was on the list of forbidden acts. It was believed that the sexual act, while part of married life, was too earthly. It was associated with physical pleasure and emotions that would distract a person from the true purpose of Shabbat, complete devotion to God. Therefore, some rabbis condemned this practice, viewing it as a serious violation. But as is common in the history of any religion, change always happens. Instead of a prohibition, something incredible occurred in mainstream Judaism. Religious leaders didn't just reject the idea of a ban, they completely flipped it. For them, intimacy on Shabbat became a sacred obligation, mitzvah. Why? Because Shabbat was transformed from a day of rest into a day of joy. And what greater joy is there than the love and closeness between spouses? Later, Shabbat came to be seen as the holy bride, Kalah. It was the day when the Jewish community drew closer to God, and intimacy between spouses symbolized this sacred bond. This is where one of the most powerful stories proving the importance of this shift comes in. The story of Yehuda ben Hia, a scholar who dedicated his life to the Torah and often forgot about everything else. But every Friday night, something strange happened. When Yehuda went home to fulfill his marital duties, a pillar of fire would appear before him. This pillar wasn't just a sign, it was a symbol of the sacred mission he had dedicated himself to. One Friday, lost in thought, Yehuda didn't head home. His father, Rabbi Yanai, noticed the fiery pillar was missing, and he uttered words that have echoed through the centuries. "Turn over his bed, for Yehuda is dead. If he were alive, he would never neglect his marital duty." And at that very moment, Yehuda died. This legend, though mythological, teaches us something profoundly important. It tells us that neglecting the sacred intimacy of Shabbat isn't just a mistake. It is a betrayal of life itself. This story is just the beginning. The shift in attitude towards Shabbat intimacy points to something much deeper. It shows us that spiritual and religious rules aren't static. They evolve to meet human needs and understanding. Intimacy ceased to be just a physical act and became a spiritual one, where two people unite before God on a holy day to not only create offspring, but also to strengthen their bond. This is one of the greatest lessons, that love, closeness, and respect between people can be just as sacred as any prayer. This is how Shabbat, the day of rest, transformed from a day of prohibitions into a day of love and joy. The act of intimacy, once a taboo, became a sacred duty, a symbol of the deepest connection between people and God. But this is only a small part of the incredible stories hidden in ancient texts and legends. The story of Yehuda ben Hia showed us that change is possible and that beliefs evolve. What if I told you that the holiest day in one of the oldest religions isn't just a day, it's a goddess? And not just any goddess, but the Greek goddess Athena. That sounds like heresy, right? Like an impossible story? But one of the greatest thinkers of his time was convinced of this. I'm talking about Philo of Alexandria, whose ideas were so radical they will completely change your perception of what faith can be. What do the Jewish Shabbat and a virgin maiden born from the head of Zeus have in common? How did an ancient philosopher see the number 7 as the key to divine power? And why were his ideas so dangerous that they were forgotten by history? We'll reveal all of this, but before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos, where we'll uncover more incredible secrets. To understand Philo's idea, we have to start with one number, 7. To us, it's just a number, but for ancient philosophers, it was a symbol of perfection. According to Philo of Alexandria, the number 7 is unique among the first 10 numbers. It can't be created by multiplying other numbers. For example, 4 equals 2 times 2. Nor can it create another number in that group. In other words, it is self-sufficient. For Philo, this wasn't just a mathematical curiosity, it was a cosmic principle. The number 7 is like a virginal, immaculate being that exists independently. It is a symbol of perfection and purity, born without external influence. And here's the most incredible part. For Philo, the number 7 was so perfect and unique that it could only be compared to Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts. Philo describes Athena as a virgin mother born from the head of Zeus. Just like her, the number 7 and Shabbat are virgin mothers. They are unborn, arising directly from God without any external help. This is revolutionary. Philo didn't just see Shabbat as a day, he saw it as a divine essence, a goddess who possessed all of Athena's qualities: sovereignty, leadership, and immaculate purity. It's a moment of complete fusion between Jewish and Greek thought, which is entirely unexpected. According to Philo, Shabbat is much more than just a day of rest. It's a cosmic expression of God's purity and commanding power. It's the day God finished creation, creating a perfect and complete world. In the same way, Shabbat is perfect and complete in itself. He described it as a virginal and unstained essence, born directly from the divine, just as Athena was born from Zeus. It's not just a day for resting, but a living divine figure that embodies the connection between humanity and the Creator. Why are Philo's ideas so significant? Because they were so dangerous. Comparing a Jewish holy entity to a pagan goddess was more than just heretical. It was a radical attempt to synthesize two cultures, which was too far for Orthodox Judaism. This is why these ideas were largely forgotten by mainstream Judaism. But they had a huge influence on early Christian thinkers, who were inspired by Philo to seek deeper, mystical meanings in the Bible. This shows us that faith isn't always a straight line. It evolves, it changes, and it sometimes allows for the intertwining of ideas that seem completely incompatible. This is the story of Shabbat, a day of rest that became a divine virgin mother born from God. It's the story of Philo of Alexandria, who dared to intertwine the worlds of Judaism and Greece. Now, I want to dive into the most mystical and poetic era of Judaism. To understand why the sages of the Talmud welcomed Shabbat as a queen, we must look at the Talmud. The sages of this period, though not as mystically inclined as Philo, who compared Shabbat to the Greek goddess Athena, perceived her with incredible love and reverence. In their eyes, Shabbat wasn't just a rule to be followed. She was a living, breathing, and beloved person. This is when the titles Shabbat the Queen and Shabbat the Bride first appeared. Imagine Rabbi Hanina, who every Friday night would wrap himself in festive clothes and exclaim, "Come, let us go to welcome Shabbat the Queen." Or Rabbi Yanai, who would call out, "Come, O bride, come, O bride." This wasn't just poetic language. It was an expression of a deep, personal connection with Shabbat as a living, cherished presence. This personification led to incredible stories about the blessings Shabbat brings. The sages believed that observing Shabbat was not only a pledge of spiritual elevation, but also a protection from earthly and heavenly troubles. For example, eating 3 meals during Shabbat was considered an act that could save a person from the horrors of messianic birth pangs, from the eternal torments of Gehenna, and even from the apocalyptic war of Gog and Magog. Shabbat was seen as the very spice that gives life flavor and pleasure. The devoted believed that angels even accompanied men to their homes on Friday night, and their blessings depended on how well the home was prepared to welcome the queen. But the most remarkable story, which reveals the depth of this personification, comes from a midrash. In it, Shabbat herself speaks. She complains to God that every other day has a partner, Sunday, Monday, etc., but she is alone, without her companion. And what is God's response? The community of Israel is your partner. This isn't just a poetic metaphor, it's an official divine promise. Shabbat is no longer just a day, but a divine partner promised to the community of Israel from the moment of creation. This transformation is extremely important. It shows that spiritual and religious rules aren't static. They evolve to meet human needs and understanding. Shabbat ceased to be just a list of prohibitions and permitted actions. She became a living connection that unites people with God and with themselves. She became a source of joy, abundance, and divine blessing. In this way, Shabbat the Queen teaches us one of the greatest lessons: that love, closeness, and respect between people can be just as sacred as any prayer. This is how an ordinary day of the week became a divine bride who descends to earth to meet her people. The story of Shabbat is a story about the deep human need for love, for connection, and for meaning. Now, I want to share with you a forgotten story that developed in an isolated community, the Falashas of Ethiopia. Forgotten for centuries, their unique way of life led to one of the most shocking evolutions of religious belief. Let's travel to Ethiopia. Over the centuries, a community of Jews known as the Falashas was completely isolated from the rest of the Jewish world. Without contact with Rabbinic Judaism, they developed their own unique form of Judaism. This isolation became fertile ground for new and unique beliefs. Instead of adopting the Talmud, the Falashas adhered to their own sacred books, including the incredible text Tizaza Sambat. And it is in this text that Shabbat, who was already seen as a bride or queen, became something much greater. Tizaza Sambat, or the Commandments of Shabbat, is their sacred text which reveals an astonishing truth. In it, Shabbat is not just a day, she is a goddess. She is one of God's first creations, a divine princess. She is crowned by no less than 90,000 angels. These heavenly beings not only pay her homage, but literally tremble in her presence. She is described as exceptionally beautiful, beloved by God Himself. But her beauty is combined with terrifying power. She is a dynamic, active force capable of cosmic intervention. What does this mean? For the Falashas, Shabbat wasn't a passive goddess. She had a direct influence on the fate of humanity. Her power was manifested in daily life, and her worship guaranteed protection and blessings. In their beliefs, observing Shabbat wasn't just a religious duty, but an act of worship toward a deity. Violating the rules of Shabbat wasn't just a sin against God, it was an insult to the goddess herself, which could lead to terrible consequences. And so, Shabbat, which began as a day of rest, passed through the phase of queen and bride to become a full-fledged goddess in the eyes of an isolated community. This story shows us that even within a single religion, beliefs can evolve in completely unexpected directions when isolated from outside influence. The Falashas give us a unique look at how human faith can create new and amazing gods. Now, I want to immerse us in an untold story from the Kabbalah, a story where Shabbat is not just a day, but a divine bride. an intimate story that intertwines mysticism, sex, and religious rites in a way you've never imagined. To understand this radical concept, we need to go back in time, before the era of the Kabbalah. Ancient texts, like the Talmud, contain brief but extremely important references. There, between the lines, Shabbat is called not just a day, but a bride and a queen. These metaphors weren't just poetic embellishments. They were the first sparks that ignited the flame of a mystical obsession. Why specifically a bride and a queen? Why not just a holy day? The answer lies in the ancient mystics' need to personify the divine, to give it a form that was understandable and tangible. This idea began to develop with exceptional force in the 12th century. One of the earliest examples comes from the remarkable scholar and poet Abraham ibn Ezra. While in England, he had one of the most influential visions in the history of Jewish mysticism. In his dream, a man gave him a letter that carried the scent of myrrh. But this was no ordinary letter. It was from Shabbat herself. In it, Shabbat declared her glory, calling herself the crown of the religion of the precious, bringing joy to men and women, the old and the young. This story was so powerful that it changed the way mystics saw Shabbat forever. A century later, Menachem ben Yaakov continued this tradition with his poetry. In one of his poems, he explicitly welcomed Shabbat as queen and bride. These words were so powerful that they were passed down from generation to generation. These early texts were like preparation for a wedding. They prepared the mystics for a new understanding of Shabbat. The day of rest became less about resting and more about anticipation. The anticipation of meeting the divine bride. And here we enter the very heart of the Kabbalah. For the Kabbalists, Shabbat isn't just an allegory, it is a reality. She is the divine feminine principle that descends from the heavens to unite with the divine masculine principle, God. During this cosmic romance, the mystics believed that they themselves participated in this act. Through their rituals, prayers, and intimate actions, they supported this erotic union. When they lit the candles on Friday evening, they weren't just performing a ritual, they were inviting the bride into their home. The sexual act itself between a husband and wife on Friday evening became a mystical replica of the divine union. This wasn't just physical pleasure, it was a sacred act that restored harmony between the divine spheres. Intimacy on Shabbat was an obligation because it helped with the creation of the world. This is how Shabbat, the day of rest, transformed from a day of prohibitions into a day of love and joy. The act of intimacy, once a taboo, became a sacred duty, a symbol of the deepest connection between people and God. But this is only a small part of the incredible stories hidden in the old texts and legends. The story of Yehuda ben Heya showed us that change is possible and that beliefs evolve. Most of us know that the fourth commandment says, "Remember the Sabbath day." But in the mystical texts of the Kabbalah, the sages discovered something much deeper. Why does one book of the Bible say remember while another says observe? For them, this isn't a mistake, it's a key to the greatest cosmic secret, a key to the idea of two divine spouses who meet every week. This is the secret of the mystical Shabbat. We'll see how this union becomes a weekly cosmic wedding that humanity celebrates. But as in any wedding, there is a rival who must be destroyed. It all begins with two verbs, remember and observe. The mystics of the 13th century began to reflect on them. They saw in them not just words, but symbols of two supernatural Sabbaths, one masculine, one feminine. Texts like the Zohar explicitly state, the children of Israel will keep the Shabbat. This refers to the night, the mystery of the feminine. And remember the Sabbath day refers to the day, the mystery of the masculine. The feminine Shabbat is called Shekhinah, or the Sephirah of kingship. She is the personification of the divine presence on earth. She is the bride.
Her masculine spouse is Yesod or Tiferet. He is the masculine aspect of the deity. This isn't just abstract theology. This is a cosmic drama that unfolds every week. The Shekhinah becomes the divine wife of Shabbat Yesod, and their union is the essence of this holy day. If Shabbat is a divine bride, how should a person welcome her? Mystics describe an extremely detailed ritual that transforms the home into a wedding hall. There should be a comfortable chair, decorated with cushions and embroidered covers. The place must be turned into a chuppah, a wedding canopy for a queen. For the masters of the Mishnah, this isn't just a metaphor. They literally went outside on Friday evening and sang, "Come, O bride, come, O bride." This is a time of joy, of light, of beautiful clothes and lavish decorations. It is the weekly celebration of the divine union. But as in every fairy tale, this love story has a rival. Against the backdrop of this joy and light, another figure hides, Lilith, the first Eve. In the mystical tradition, Lilith isn't just a demon. She is the evil handmaiden of the divine bride. She is the rival who is dressed in darkness, hunger, and weeping. The curious coincidence is that this same holy night, dedicated to receiving the divine bride, is also the night when Lilith is most active. She is a demon who wanders in the night to seduce men. Why the simultaneous existence of these two rituals? Why exactly this night? Because in the eyes of the mystics, the arrival of the divine bride must destroy Lilith's power. The joy itself, the light of the lit candles, the beautiful clothes, and the wedding atmosphere are the weapons against Lilith's darkness. The choice, it seems, was simple: the holy bride or the wicked temptress. According to the teachings of the Kabbalah, when a man and woman unite on Shabbat, they not only repeat the divine union, but also destroy Lilith's power. They choose divine harmony over chaos and temptation. This is how a seemingly simple commandment, remember the Sabbath day, becomes an epic mystical story about a cosmic wedding, a divine union, and a battle against the forces of darkness.
Now, I want to tell you about an ancient philosopher who discovered hidden messages in prayers about a marriage between God and Shabbat. I'll take you to the mystical fields of the 16th century, where Kabbalists went out to welcome the queen and bride with songs and dances. You will understand how your Friday afternoon can be part of a divine wedding. This story is so unusual and inspiring that it will change the way you think about traditions, faith, and even love. To understand this revolution, we have to go back to the 14th century, to the thoughts of a prominent commentator named David ben Yosef Abudarham. While everyone saw the Shabbat prayers as simple hymns for rest, Abudarham saw something much deeper. He read them as allusions to a heavenly betrothal. For him, the phrase, "You sanctified the seventh day for your name" from the evening prayer didn't just mean sanctification. It meant you betrothed the day of Shabbat to yourself. He argued that every word, every line of the prayers recited on Friday evening was part of a sacred wedding ceremony. Even the prayer, "Moses rejoiced," was interpreted as celebrating the joy of the divine bridegroom from his bride, Shabbat. And the prayer, "You are one," symbolized the intimate union of this cosmic couple. This wasn't just a prayer, but participation in a divine wedding, a weekly renewal of a sacred covenant. This idea didn't just remain in a philosophical treatise, it developed even more with the arrival of the Kabbalah. In the holy book Zohar, Shabbat is described as the holy matron, matronet, the divine bride who prepares for her union with God, the King. According to the Zohar, the union of God and his bride takes place in a mystical place called the Holy Apple Orchard. This garden is a metaphor for the Garden of Eden. But here's the interesting part. In it, instead of the serpent from the story of Adam and Eve, there is a serpent of God. She is a symbol of the feminine power and the divine Shekhinah who unites with God. In this garden, the mystical union between God and Shabbat creates the souls of the righteous.
Every week, this divine marriage renews the world and gives life to new souls. This mysticism didn't just stay in books. In the 16th century, the Kabbalists of the city of Safed turned it into a beautiful living ritual. Every Friday evening, as the sun set, they would leave the city and go to the surrounding hills and fields. Their goal was to welcome Shabbat, who was coming toward them as a queen and bride. They called this ritual welcoming the face of Shabbat. Their mood would change. They would fall into a state of euphoria and begin to sing. This is when the song Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved, was born. This song, which is now sung in all synagogues around the world, was an invitation to the divine bride. Come, my friend, let us welcome the bride. Let us receive the face of Shabbat. The entire procession resembled a traditional wedding, where the groom and his friends go to meet the bride. And the fields where they welcomed Shabbat were transformed into the holy apple orchard, where the divine union took place. What is the deeper meaning of this wedding? It's not just a beautiful metaphor. It's a key to understanding one of the most important ideas in mystical Judaism. Shabbat, as the divine bride, is a personification of the Shekhinah, the divine presence on earth. Due to the sins of humanity, the Shekhinah is separated from God. But every week on Shabbat, through the prayers and rituals of the people, she unites with him. This isn't just a union of two divine entities. It is a restoration of harmony in the entire universe. Every Shabbat, we don't just rest, we actively participate in the restoration of the cosmos, helping to complete the divine union. This is how Shabbat, a day of the week, can become the stage for a divine wedding. From a philosophical treatise and prayers to a living ritual in the fields of Safed, this idea shows us that faith is dynamic and evolves.
Now, I want to examine a shocking hypothesis, see why historical facts reject it, and reveal the true, even more amazing secret that lies in the night of Shabbat, a secret that transforms the intimacy between a man and a woman into a divine sacrament. To fully understand the debate, we need to go back to the Kabbalists of Safed, who welcomed Shabbat outdoors. Why outdoors? Some scholars see more than just a romantic ritual in this. They suggest that perhaps it is an echo of ancient pagan practices. The emphasis on the open field and fields has led some historians to speculate about love affairs in the open under the benevolent glow of the star Venus. They connect Shabbat the bride with the ancient goddess of love, Ishtar, Venus, the queen of heaven. This is a truly captivating, almost scandalous thought. Is it possible that these deeply devout mystics, in their ecstatic state, were touching something much older, something that was at odds with the strict rules of their faith? This theory is extremely interesting, but we must be honest, the historical evidence completely rejects it. The Kabbalists of Safed lived in a Muslim environment where the separation between men and women was unshakable. Public communication between men and women was absolutely unthinkable. While secret, forbidden relationships certainly existed, a public celebration appropriate for the Queen of Love would have been something completely abhorrent and unthinkable to them. So what was happening in those sacred fields? Prayers, songs, and rituals, yes, but not what the scandalous theory suggests. The erotic energy was there, but it was expressed in a completely different way and in a completely different place. The true erotic energy of Shabbat was not expressed outdoors, but in the bedroom. For the Kabbalists, intimacy on Shabbat was not just permitted, it was a profound religious ritual. This act wasn't a secret pleasure, but a deeply mystical practice, especially when performed after midnight. Why exactly then? The reasons for this time unlock some of the most amazing secrets of the Kabbalah. According to the Zohar, intimacy on Shabbat is an imitation of the divine act. By uniting with their wives, they aren't just fulfilling a commandment, they are helping the deity achieve its mystical unity. The Zohar offers a radical interpretation of a passage from Isaiah that speaks of eunuchs who observe Shabbat.
Eunuchs, according to the traditional understanding, are people who cannot have intimate relations. But the Zohar explains that these eunuchs are actually scholars who castrate themselves from worldly pleasures all week to dedicate themselves to the law. But on the night of Shabbat, they are spurred to intercourse because they understand the sublime secret of the hour in which the matron unites with the king. Through their union with their wives, they are literally helping the divine bride, the Shekhinah, to unite with God. Their physical act becomes a mirror of the cosmic union, which restores harmony in the universe. This is how a scandalous theory about ancient pagan practices leads us to one of the most intimate and mystical secrets of the Kabbalah. Shabbat is a day that doesn't just offer rest, but an opportunity to become active participants in a divine drama. This is a story about the amazing ways in which people imagine the divine.
What if we imagine that sex isn't just physical pleasure? It's not just a way to create offspring. It's a divine ritual, one of the most important acts in the universe. Most people associate intimacy with pleasure and closeness, but for one of the greatest mystics in history, Isaac Luria, it was the key to the cosmic order. It was the moment when human action helped God unite with himself. To understand this complex concept, we must delve into the teachings of Isaac Luria, known as the Ari, the divine eagle. He was one of the most influential Kabbalists of the 16th century, who created an incredibly complex and detailed system for the structure of the universe. In his system, the divine Shekinah, who is the feminine aspect of God, has two faces: the lower aspect, Leah, and the higher aspect, Rachel. The masculine aspect of God, called the small face, also Jacob or Israel, has different levels of coitus with Leah throughout the week. But this is only preparation. The entire week is a prelude to one event, an event that happens only once a week. According to Luria, the culmination occurs after midnight on Friday evening. In that moment, the highest union in the deity takes place. The small face and Rachel unite. This is a moment of supreme grace, of the highest level of unity. For a person immersed in this mystical tradition, Shabbat wasn't just a day of rest. It was a day when everything on earth became a mirror of what was happening in heaven. An ordinary home was transformed into a royal palace. The lady of the house was identified with the Queen Shabbat, the divine matron, the very wife of God. The master of the house, in turn, received an additional soul from above, which expanded his consciousness and allowed him to see the divine in everything. This understanding of intimacy is light years away from the ancient Canaanite orgiastic festivals. But despite the enormous differences, they share one common thread: the deep human need to sanctify and elevate sexual impulses. The need to give a carnal act a higher, divine meaning. By imitating the union between a man and a woman, we seek a connection with something greater than ourselves. In these mystical rituals, human desire becomes a channel, a mirror that reflects a larger, more powerful cosmic union. This is how Shabbat, a day of the week, can become the stage for a divine wedding. From a philosophical treatise and prayers to a living ritual in the fields of Safed, this idea shows us that faith is dynamic and evolves. It teaches us that religious rituals can be much more than just rules. They can be poetry, love songs, and symbols of the cosmic order. What do you think about the idea of intimacy as a divine ritual? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and these captivating stories about history, religion, and human nature, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. Until next time.